Major funding for this program is made possible by grants from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Inc., New York's window company, New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional funding is provided by grants from Briarwood Organization, Beechwood Organization, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman and Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Friedman, LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Jack Jaffa and Associates, Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Markham LLP, Marcus and Millichap, Margolin Weiner and Evans LLP, M&T Bank, Meridian Capital Group, the Moynihan Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Orphanides and Associates, SJP Properties, Sterling and Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, Urban American, the Wickoff Group.
Hello, my name is Michael Stoller. So here we are. It's the spring of 2010. The market looks better. The world looks a little better. People say there's no longer a recession. What does it really mean? What does it truly mean for the residential market in New York City? So since I don't have my crystal ball or my crystal apple, I had to assemble 4 individuals who own a lot of apartments, who have converted a number of apartments, and who build apartments in New York City and around the boroughs. My guests today are Philip Eisenberg, chairman of Urban American, like 14,000 apartments. Lawrence Gluck, chairman, CEO, Graham Pupa, Stella Management, with lots of apartments also. David Kramer from the Hudson Companies, a principal over there. And last but definitely not least, one of the guys who's like my Ed McMahon, who's been with me all these years, Ophir Denny, managing member, co-founder, CEO of Stonehenge Partners. So just before we started the show, I said, if we were here a year ago, how would you look at the market? How was the market a year ago, Ophir?
Clearly, the market was very depressed. Yes, absolutely, and the environment was very negative.
Say really bad.
Yes, and people thought that the world is coming to an end, and people acted in this kind of way. We had a lot of layoffs, and so the market was not a favorable market. It's not what we wanted. But clearly today it's a different market.
Mr. Gluck, where do you see, okay, let's not talk about 2009. Let's talk about the spring of 2010. Where are we and how do you see this in the residential rental market and even the conversion market?
2010 now, clearly we're way up off the lows of a year ago this time. Concessions are down. The residential rental rates are firming. I think, and we've discussed this, all of us, I think that with employment in New York City still at 10%, I think a little bit of it is what I call a sugar high from low interest rates and everybody feeling they have more money as a result, and the equity markets being up 70% from their lows, and it being a beautiful spring day and everybody feels good about themselves. But, and yes, concessions are down and the market is firming, and I believe everyone recognizes that. That being said, I think there's a note of caution, and I'd like to see this rush be maintained beyond the spring rental season.
Now, I know when you started your business, you bought properties north of 96th Street, Washington Heights and other places. And Philip, you have lots of properties in the Heights and in the Bronx and other markets. Somebody a couple of months ago said to me and on the show, he said, the people who live up in those sections, you know, it's still difficult with unemployment, with the economy over here. How are they reacting? How are the the Heights and Inwood?
It's interesting that you say that, Michael, because in my experience, the tertiary, what I call tertiary or secondary markets of Upper Manhattan in particular, suffered, it's counterintuitive, but suffered less in coupon rate and concessions than our prime Manhattan product, our fair market rental product. Now it's kind of caught up a little bit, but we did well in those outer boroughs. In the market, in the downtown market, where I had to compete with my friend Ofer Yardeni, we had to really dig quite deep.
But you have to compare it to rent stabilized in the city versus the rent stabilized in the boroughs. And I think that your collections in the boroughs are a lot tougher than the collection here in the city, and your expenses are a lot higher.
The margins are lower in the outer boroughs, and the expenses are higher. There are older properties; they need constant capex. The lost the lost revenues as a result of skips and just plain non-pays are higher in those outer boroughs. Yes.
Philip, you have lots of properties in the outer boroughs.
Larry's right about the higher expenses, and so is the Ofer. But I will say that, for instance, in the Bronx, we've never had a problem renting. As soon as we renovate a unit, and we do a pretty good job of renovating once we get a vacant back, and our re-rents of renovated apartments, they go quickly. They don't stand around. Now, we haven't increased rents any significant amount in the last 18 months, but we don't give concessions in those areas. We pay the broker now, and as Ofer said before, you can't not pay 1 month and pay the next month because it confuses them all. So about a year ago, we stopped. You know, it was we always pay the broker for everybody now.
Now it's interesting that you and David have properties on Roosevelt Island, which is Manhattan. People don't realize.
Thank you, Michael.
Manhattan.
212?
212. But how do you see Roosevelt Island? Because you have older units and you have relatively brand new units on Roosevelt Island.
We're waiting for him to lease up his brand new units so that we can sort of raise our prices in the others. We're giving some concessions there for renewals to make sure people stay in. We haven't been giving very much in the way of concessions on the new units that we've renovated.
But I think
we haven't raised our prices.
But I think that
at all.
would be a general comment. You're giving probably a concession for renewal because you'd rather have a tenant stay over there as opposed to potentially renting up the space or paying a brokerage commission. Is it right?
Not necessarily. Depends. Of course, it's the rent that the tenant is paying. I have certain tenants that came a year ago because remember our business is a year to year. And some of our tenants that came last year, you gave them a larger concession package. So when the renewal comes this year, I do not necessarily have to give them concession. And some of the rents I'm able even to increase $25 or $50 a month rent. Also, you have to talk about areas in the cities and if the building is complete fair market versus if it's rent stabilized on fair market. But clearly, a year ago, when a tenant came to renewal, you had to reduce his rent or give him the same concession because today's tenants do not have anything in their apartments. They can move in 24 hours, just pack their clothes, and go from the 33rd floor to the 23rd floor for a cheaper apartment. So logic dictates that you will you will give them the same concession as the tenants that comes from outside because you don't want to have a lot of vacancies.
Now, both you, the two of you, have new properties that you're marketing. You're marketing a new rental, and you're marketing a new rental and a couple of condo and a conversion. How do you see that market today?
Well, our product, Columbus Square on the Upper West Side, is on Columbus Avenue between 97th and 100th with an additional building on Amsterdam, all part of a collection we call Columbus Square. We're doing well there, but our product is unique. We have a tenant amenity package mostly, well, highlighted by our third floor outdoor deck, which stretches unimpeded from 97th to 100th Street. It's a landscaped area with a swimming pool. It's an unusual, for New York City, an unusual amenity package, and therefore we're doing very well over there. We have basically net effective rents in the, call it high 60s a foot, which is unusual, and we're very pleased about that.
And you also have
That sounds good.
and you also have a Whole Foods
We do have a Whole Foods
and an Associated, right?
the Associated is on Amsterdam. The Whole Foods is at 97th and Columbus, and yes, that is probably worth $1 or $2 a foot. It's
That actually stings a little bit because we bought a site in Carroll Gardens a block and a half from where the first Whole Foods in Brooklyn was going to be. And they got into a bit of an environmental quagmire. It still may go ahead. It's just been very slow. It should have been open by now. Because you could make a lot of money just doing a Whole Foods real estate strategy.
So
but-
get back to the situation. You have new buildings in Roosevelt Island. You have a conversion in Cobble Hill.
I mean, basically, we have 3 new buildings in Brooklyn that we literally just opened in the last 10 days. A conversion project in Cobble Hill called Cobble Hill Towers, which is a historic landmark 188-unit building. Third and Bond in Carroll Gardens, which is 44-unit new construction. And a project in Bushwick called The Nick, which we are opening tonight, which is a conversion of a building on Hart Knickerbocker that's basically been vacant on the upper floors since the blackout, and now we're converting to condominiums. And we're bullish on all 3. I think.
And what are the prices of the condominiums?
At Cobble Hill Tower, which is a conversion, we're offering insider pricing to the existing tenants at $500 a foot and outside pricing at $700 a foot. With all 3 projects, we have financing in place, which I think is a key to being successful in today's market. FHA, Sunny Mae,
And they're finished.
Fannie Mae.
Somebody can see the apartments.
Yeah.
They don't have to imagine, that the apartment is.
Yeah, what's interesting is that 2 out of those 3 projects are new construction, and new construction never exactly happens as quickly as you'd like it to happen. But I think our timing is going to work out very well because we're now at the stage where the project is far enough along that the TCO is in sight, people can close in 60 or 90 days, and I think spring 2010 is going to be a great time to sell apartments. And for instance, at Third and Bond, we opened up our sales office last November because we had a finished model. And I was still a little bit going under the old school assumption that as long as you have a model and you can see the finishes and the kitchens and the baths, that buyers can make informed decisions. But the site was still too construction-y. There was still too much debris, there was too much fencing, bridge, construction bridge. And so you really have to clean up your sites. They've got to be, very presentable. With a basically finished product, with financing in place, and a lot of the units in these 3 buildings are FHA friendly. They're Fannie Mae friendly. You can get up to 97% financing through FHA when the building is at 30% pre-sales. So we'll see, but I'm enthusiastic. Our brokers are enthusiastic, which is, you'd think of course, the brokers are enthusiastic, but brokers are, brokers don't want to set themselves up to fail. Brokers are not always bullish, and for the first time in a long time, I'd say it's been 3 years since, any brokers had a little skip in their step. So we'll see. And then Roosevelt Island we've had for a while, but we're almost done.
Here's an interesting situation. Ofer, who's been in the business of owning and operating for at least 15, 16 years, recently did a condo conversion. Larry's done a number of condo conversions over the years. Now you're doing another condo. You're doing a condo conversion. Philip, you've done a condo conversion. Do you think there is a pent-up demand by purchasers, by New Yorkers, to buy condominiums?
I'll tell you, for me, it's the first conversion that we are doing. And we started this conversion in the real worst economic times. And we used to own all our properties as rental, and I felt that I will continue to own all of them as rental. But I love this business of conversion because I believe really...
Maybe one day you even like going to Brooklyn.
Maybe. But if you look at it, what's the American dream? Everybody wants to own a home. So,
you know
New York,
something, Ofer?
everybody still, I still believe that everybody would like to
Ofer,
own their home.
Ofer? I
think I agree.
They think that they are controlling their destiny, even though if they are 95% leverage or 99, they
I
want to
agree with
own
him.
their home.
But to me,
I'll just tell you that if I would like to convert buildings and to try to sell them at not more than $1,000 a square foot.
So you think there's this price point?
So I think that
There
there
is.
is the price point, and if we are able to buy buildings rent stabilized at $300, $400, $500 a square foot, clean them, and then sell them at $1,000 a square foot. And what does it mean? It means that a unit that is 650 square foot will go for $650,000. I don't want to do combinations of unit. I don't want to change the layout. I want to take the buildings the way they are, simply renovate them and sell them.
Okay, I see Larry wanting to say
Well,
something.
I agree fundamentally with Ofer's proposition that Americans, notwithstanding the subprime crisis, do want to own. That being said, you know, in the 80s, it was the same business plan. This is nothing original. Buy the building at X, renovate it, and sell into a hot market.
The only difference was tax shelter, guys.
Yeah. That being said, I'm not sure that business plan, I'd like to see some legs in our conversions to see if I would do that as a business model, because it's a little bit like pulling the pin on a hand grenade. If you're not successful,
If your absorption is not,
if your absorption is not there, you're left with a building that doesn't
The
carry.
key is how much leverage you are putting on the building.
Yes. Yeah.
And if the way we buy real estate, we really put 30 to 40% leverage. So if you put
that's a
30 to
beautiful thing.
40%, thank God we can
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
So if we are doing it,
I
Yes.
think a condo, my definition of a condo is a project that doesn't work as a rental. I would be happy
completely
to
disagree
do
with you.
I would be happy to do just rental buildings, but I think what happened, and certainly the conversion we're doing, is that the rental business is a hard business when cap rates got so low. So it sort of made more sense if the pricing is at such a low cap rate to look at it as a sale if you don't have this ticking time bomb, if there's a way you can do leverage. What we did in Cobble Hill is we partnered with the owner, and that's a way to, you know, reduce risk.
So my dear friend, I disagree with you because even if you'll take in Manhattan and if you're getting $60 a square foot net rent and your expenses are $30 to run it, so you have $30 net, and if you sell it at 5% cap rate, you can sell it for $600 a square foot, okay? If I can take the same product and sell it at $1,000 a square foot, and forget about the taxes because taxes are issues,
I was gonna mention the
if I
taxes.
can do that and I'm able to provide tenants with a home, and yes, it takes a longer period of time, but the returns are unbelievable. And you need to assume that absorption will be longer, but you are taking and changing the whole
I don't-
class.
I
of
don't
business.
I don't
I'd
disagree,
like
but-
Philip, you know, who's been in this business a long time, to give his thoughts.
Well, I think, you know, you're right. I think people want to own homes when it's possible. Of course, we found out there are a lot of people who shouldn't own their own homes.
Yes, we do.
And but I think it's got to be with patient capital. I mean, I can tell you, I'm still getting checks from the Imperial House. And when was that converted? In the early 70s? And so
I don't know. It's before my time. I'm not
but it-
that.
I mean, but our equity was
boy.
patient. Our equity was patient.
Isn't that great when a
equity,
unit sells and all of a
right?
sudden?
And we
You
have no
converted
interest.
the Imperial House?
I was an investor. My father was an investor in it. I was a little baby then. But the idea was that if you're in the position where you've got to get your equity out and then you've got to dump your unsold shares to somebody who's going to sell them in bulk, it's not a good business.
but all
if
of
you're
you-
willing to take the ride on the unsold shares and your equity is low enough so that you can continue with that, I think it's a good business.
But Larry and us, we are managing and running rent stabilized in the city.
So
on
is
one
Philip.
hand,
So do we,
yes.
yeah.
So we sell the fair market, and whatever we left with rent stabilized will continue to run. And whenever we get a unit, it becomes completely
Yeah, that's
decontrolled.
nice. That's a nice
our
hybrid.
business model.
So
for
that's
those,
the
right.
business model, and if we do it with very
Patient capital.
low leverage, you can do that.
Now, but you have money from investors. You have all of you have money from investors. What's the strategy that the investors want you to do?
Well, if it's to the extent it's an endowment that has patient money, they don't mind. They like they like the return, and they're fine. They'll give it to you forever.
So union pension fund, or,
That's right. It's some other institutions, have a more immediate horizon. They want to be out in 7 or 8 years, so you have to decide how you're going to deal with that issue down the road. But
and your investors?
Well, every investor group has their own horizon. The opportunity funds that we partner with on the larger deals are generally 5-year hold, mid-teens returns kind of investors.
So I can tell you that we just finished auditing our books and the appraisal that we do on a year-to-year because of our appraisals, because of our partners, institution partners, and we show that on the properties that we sold in New York with leverage of 55 to 60%, we had IRRs of 40% net to the investors, net to the pension funds, after fees investing in New York City. So nobody is complaining if it's a conversion or multifamily, because there is a misconception that the returns on multifamily, and I'm sure Larry's numbers can be even higher because he did some more creative deals than we did. We just bought simple rental apartment building. But the returns are there. It's not a story that is being told, but you can have returns
but now
like
you
that.
bring up a good point. People, the market in office has improved. What is the ability to buy new buildings, not new buildings, buildings in this market? How are you able to buy? Are there buildings for sale, and are sellers selling at reasonable prices? Or
we have money to buy. We're looking. We're very careful because you should be able to get a better return going in today than you did 2 years ago. But we have the ability to pay all cash and then refinance later, and we've been able to buy, but not huge packages. It's being careful, buying a building here or buying a building there.
If you look at the property sales numbers, they're still low, and it's because there's still a spread between the bid and the ask, and especially now that things are a little better.
But there is, next week I'm doing a show with 4 banking executives who are all in the multifamily financing, and there's a lot of money for multifamily financing today.
There is a lot of money, but I can tell you about the deal that I really missed. That the deal that Sam Zell bought, 3 buildings that paid $475 million from the Macklow family. Now, this is a transaction that we should have bought, and we made a mistake that we didn't. Yes, it's true that he bought it at around 4.5 or 4.2 cap rate, but the assets were sold at around $550 a square foot. Now, this asset in 2007, if they were going to the market,
would have been $1,100 a foot.
Exactly. So the purchase price, because rents declined 25 or 30% if you calculate the concession and the OP and the reduction of rent. So Sam Zell, and I have no stock in his company, so I'm not trying to improve his balance of his stocks. Sam Zell did a great acquisition because as an asset play, he bought very, very cheap. Yes, he paid low cap rate, but when the market will turn around, he can either sell them at around $1,000 a square foot or to a converter.
He also he had so much money from the from the REIT sales
but we all
last year, the equity that he was able to buy.
But we are all sitting, right. Larry sitting with a lot of money. My fund, I'm sitting with over
Sam
300
Zell was sitting
million.
He made one of the greatest sales in the history of this country.
That was timing.
That was right. But this is a different entity. This is equity residential, which is a totally different entity than equity office. But I think there is money for refinancing. There is money over there. I think
the banks are lending on income-producing properties.
You bring out a good point. A number of years ago, the banks were lending on income-producing and on projection.
And what is the Carlton House? Excuse me, Mr. Stoller. Wake up! What's the Carlton House?
Carlton House is a different thing.
Carlton House is
retail.
Really? The retail is $3.5 million on a purchase price of $170 million.
There's retail and it's a luxury co-op.
Luxury. Listen what you're saying. Luxury co-op with ceiling heights of 8.5 foot ceiling heights.
Stanhope sold the
Wake
same
up!
way.
The banks are already there, Michael. If somebody is financing this transaction, okay? They are already not thinking about a projection on rental. They are really thinking about projection on condo in 3 or 4 years. You have so many issues with this transaction, and there was a bidding war.
Everybody wanted it.
200 people looked at
You're
it.
saying the banks are back?
On several situations, on
Th-
certain
that's, I-
location, the banks are absolutely bare.
I'll give you
there.
better. I ran into somebody who I wanted to have on this show, but he had a conflict, and he is doing a new construction. And I said to him, "How are you doing?" I said, "What, 2 or 3 banks?" He said, "No, 9 banks have called me up, having an interest in this construction loan."
Michael, I think at a lower leverage level, at a lower debt service, at a higher debt service coverage level, yes, the money is there. They're not engaging in the fiction of the last cycle where they would escrow a debt service escrow and pretend that that was cash flow from the property and let you grow into it like the securitized deals did. Yes, there's money available, but it's 70%.
You bring up a very
70%'s
no,
a high
but
number.
I have a big question. I mean, you had securitized mortgages. You had securitized mortgages.
Only one.
No, but you've
But
never
it
had
turned-
securitized mortgages.
Wait, and it turned out not to
No,
be
I
one.
had.
Oh,
I
you
had
had
the
a secu-
REITs,
oh, right,
and
secur-
now
Do
I
you see, because the securitized market is back, it is
Yes.
back, do you see the securitized market being back in the residential marketplace?
absolutely.
I think under certain circumstances, and as Larry just said, it's going to be more realistic. They're not going to do a discounted cash flow analysis, and they're not going to base it on how many apartments you can get turned over so that you can get higher rents in those apartments, except for natural turnover. And so there, and I think when it comes back, the interesting part I think is going to be is who keeps the risk of the bottom piece.
I have a couple more shows before the end of the 9th season, and before the 10th season, I will find out when my date is for my next taping, and I want to bring the 4 of you back. I'd like to thank Philip Eisenberg, Larry Gluck, forget Lawrence Gluck, over here, David Kramer, and Ofer Yordeni. Next week,
Thank you.
the bankers to these people will give us their perspective. See you next week.
Thank you.
Major funding for this program is made possible by grants from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Inc., New York's window company, New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional funding is provided by grants from Briarwood Organization, Beechwood Organization, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman and Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Friedman, LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Jack Jaffa and Associates, Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Markham LLP, Marcus and Millichap, Margolin Weiner and Evans LLP, M&T Bank, Meridian Capital Group, The Moynihan Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Orphanides and Associates, SJP Properties, Sterling and Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, Urban American, The Wickoff Group.